And for more NASA videos, hit subscribe.
Nice launch trajectory and countdown net. Pad is clear.
10, 9, 8.
Launch auto sequence has started.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Go for launch.
Vehicle is supersonic.
Stage separation confirmed. Dragon separation confirmed. Stage 1 is transonic. Landing legs have deployed. And Falcon 9 has landed.
You are looking at a live view of Falcon 9 and Dragon awaiting liftoff from Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. In just over 18 minutes, Falcon 9 will lift off carrying Dragon and the CRS-31 mission to the International Space Station. Good evening, I'm Yomei Zhou, a lead propulsion engineer here at SpaceX. Dragon will deliver about 3 tons of science, supplies, and equipment to the space station and will return with over 4,000 pounds in about a month. After an almost 13-hour flight, Dragon will autonomously dock to the space station on Tuesday, November 5th at approximately 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. This mission will mark SpaceX's 105th flight of 2024 and Dragon's 5th trip to the station this year. Today's spacecraft will be the first Dragon supporting a cargo mission to fly for the 5th time, and coincidentally, the Falcon 9 booster supporting today's mission will also be making its 5th flight. Reusability is key to everything we do here at SpaceX, and to date, we've reflown Dragon spacecraft on 27 missions and Falcon boosters on 333 missions combined. Dragon is the only U.S. vehicle flying today that can fly a round trip to and from the space station, carrying vital supplies and returning safely with critical cargo. The spacecraft flying today may also be the first Dragon to perform initial tests once docked with the station that demonstrate Dragon's reboost capability. These tests are designed to show Dragon's ability to control the station's attitude and altitude, with more on that in just a few minutes. Now, over at the pad, propellant loading began about 15 minutes ago and will complete at the T-minus 2-minute mark. Weather is looking great with only a 30% probability of violating launch weather constraints. The eastern range is green and ready to support, and everything is looking good as we count down to an instantaneous launch attempt at 9:29 p.m. Eastern Time today. With that, let's check in with Joseph at NASA in Houston.
I'm coming to you live from the International Space Station Flight Control Room at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, where our flight controllers, led by Flight Director Ron Spencer and his Gemini flight team, are monitoring the International Space Station, Dragon's ultimate destination after tonight's launch. We're closely following the launch and collaborating with you and the teams in Hawthorne, as well as the Falcon 9 team at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, to ensure that all launch criteria are met. Now, earlier in the countdown, a device called the Lab Router that enables telemetry for the crew on board the International Space Station to monitor Dragon went down. The crew was then briefly awakened from their sleep shift and recycled that router successfully. And right now, I am happy to report that the teams here in Mission Control are go for launch. The International Space Station and its crew members, including NASA astronaut and Commander Sonny Williams, Butch Wilmore, Don Pettit, and Nick Hague, are ready to welcome Dragon with its anticipated docking tomorrow morning. The crew is rested and ready to receive Dragon after witnessing the relocation of Crew 9's Dragon spacecraft after relocating from the forward-facing port of the station's Harmony module, Node 2, or the zenith-facing port of the module to clear its path for the arrival of the commercial resupply mission. Now, as we shift our focus here in Houston to the countdown for Dragon, I'll hand it back to you in Hawthorne for more details on the vehicles involved in this mission. Yomei?
As we continue to count down, let's take a closer look at the vehicles that will be taking CRS-31 to the space station today. Sitting atop the Falcon 9 rocket, Dragon and its trunk stand about 27 feet tall. Dragon has 16 Draco thrusters that can be used in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. Dragon's trunk attached below the spacecraft holds solar cells that power Dragon while it's in free flight, and the trunk can also carry unpressurized cargo, which it will be doing today. About 50 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin, exposing its guidance navigation controls that help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station. The nose cone also houses the docking mechanism that will connect with the station. Dragon has played a significant role in advancing our future in space by safely transporting crew and cargo to and from the space station. Altogether, the reusable Dragon spacecraft fleet has completed 9 human spaceflight missions on behalf of NASA and has both visited the station and returned to Earth 43 times under NASA's commercial resupply and commercial crew programs. This particular spacecraft has supported 4 previous commercial resupply missions for NASA, including CRS-21, 23, 25, and 28. And launching Dragon to orbit today is Falcon 9, a 2-stage rocket developed and manufactured by SpaceX, known for its safe, reliable, and cost-effective access to space. Just underneath Dragon, we have the second stage of the vehicle. The second stage is powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVac, which is optimized to perform in the vacuum of space. And that second stage will secure Dragon's entry into low Earth orbit before separating, leaving Dragon to continue its journey to the space station on its own thrusters. Just below the second stage is the first stage, which contains 8 engines arranged around one center engine, all held in place by a structure called the Octaweb. Each of these Merlin 1D engines delivers about 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, which gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7 million pounds of thrust. The booster supporting today's mission previously launched 4 missions, including Crew 8, Polaris Dawn, and 2 Starlink missions. Now, with T0 coming up in just about 12.5 minutes, our teams in Florida are doing a series of system checks to ensure Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready to fly. Now, while on station, the CRS-31 spacecraft flying today may also perform 2 initial tests to demonstrate Dragon's ability to control the space station's attitude as well as Dragon's reboost capability. Reboosts are necessary to counteract the effects of atmospheric drag, which can cause the station to lose altitude. Once the station is in a configuration for SpaceX's reboost demo, the aft Draco engines in the service section will fire for just over 12 minutes and give the station a boost. SpaceX has partnered with NASA on the creation of control algorithms to help guide and steer the Dragon and ISS through these dynamic events, which will be the first time Dragon performs tests of this nature on station. SpaceX will leverage data collected during CRS-31 to inform important analyses, which will support future enhanced capabilities and programs like the U.S. Deorbit Vehicle, or USDV. NASA selected SpaceX to develop and deliver the USDV, which will be used to deorbit the space station in a controlled manner after the end of its operational life in 2030. The USDV will be based on today's Dragon, but will feature a redesigned, larger trunk section with more Draco thrusters to help lower the station's orbit. The vehicle will also need 6 times the usable propellant and 3 to 4 times the power generation and storage of today's Dragon spacecraft. Falcon 9 and Dragon have played a significant role in advancing our future in space by safely transporting both crew and cargo to and from the space station. There are currently 3 Dragon capsules used for cargo missions, which have collectively flown 10 CRS missions to date, and there are 4 capsules supporting human spaceflight that have docked to the station. Their names are Endeavour, Resilience, Endurance, and Freedom. Crew 9 arrived on board Dragon Freedom, which is currently docked to the station and is SpaceX's 15th human space mission since 2020, when Dragon became the first private spacecraft to take humans to the International Space Station. As Joseph mentioned, Crew 9 actually just completed a port relocation maneuver from the Ford port to the Zenith port over the weekend to make room for CRS-31 launch today. Now, as the countdown continues, let's check back with Joseph at JSC.
Thank you very much, Yome. Teams here in Houston continue to monitor the countdown of NASA's SpaceX CRS-31 mission with everything on track for a successful launch. 2024 has been a year of important achievements for the International Space Station, showcasing what's possible through collaboration, as NASA's 31st commercial resupply mission with SpaceX marks the 12th launch to the orbiting laboratory this year, and it's clear that success in space is a collective effort, built on dedication and teamwork. Let's take a closer look at how this team effort has kept the station thriving throughout the year.
The year began with Progress 87 delivering essential supplies to the International Space Station. NASA's SpaceX 29th commercial resupply mission followed, bringing critical research and hardware, ensuring support for science aboard the orbiting laboratory. Axiom Mission 3 expanded the station's research capabilities, introducing new perspectives from around the world. In March, NASA's SpaceX Crew 8 launched from Florida, each crew's transition mirroring the importance of coordination and teamwork in maintaining station operations. As the year progressed, NASA's 30th resupply mission with SpaceX and the arrival of additional crew aboard Soyuz MS-25 sustained the flow of research, resources, and explorers. Progress 88 reinforced the station's supply chain, maintaining momentum for new scientific discoveries. As summer arrived, Boeing's Crew Flight Test marked a key milestone in human spaceflight. And Northrop Grumman's NG-21 mission delivered supplies critical to daily life and research. The arrival of Soyuz MS-26 added to the station's capability for long-duration human spaceflight. With the recent arrival of Crew 9, the station continues to be a hub of progress and global cooperation. It's a place where scientists and explorers from across our planet work together, advancing our understanding of life in space, creating opportunities for the future. Every mission this year, from cargo deliveries to crewed launches and hosting 25 residents, reminds us that space exploration is a shared endeavor. The commitment and adaptability of countless individuals, both on Earth and in orbit, keep the station thriving. As we look ahead, we remain focused on building a future where exploration continues to push boundaries for all humanity.
As we reflect on the accomplishments of 2024, it's clear that every milestone aboard the International Space Station biological systems suitable for use in bioregenerative life support systems on future missions. Dozens of samples will be exposed to space to evaluate material stability and to help researchers better understand the impacts of spaceflight. Results could support better design for spacecraft and satellites. Researchers will demonstrate cold welding techniques in space and evaluate sample integrity. Results could aid in the development of interior spacecraft repair methods and improve applications of cold welding on Earth. Discover more about all of the science making the journey to the orbiting lab at nasa.gov/ISS-science.
It is currently T-minus 5 minutes and 10 seconds, and everything continues to be go for launch. Coming up shortly, the transporter erector, also known as the strongback or TE, will retract away from Falcon. The TE is the large truss structure you see there.
9 tanks are pressing for strongback retract.
Next to the rocket, you just heard that call out that the tanks are pressing in preparation
Is it configured for terminal count?
for strongback retract, and Dragon is in configure for terminal count.
Dragon is in terminal count and is on internal power.
There is that call out for Dragon transitioning to internal power. And ahead of the transporter erector reclining, you'll see the clamp arms just below Dragon
Strongback lower has started.
begin to open. Now the transporter erector is designed to transport, raise, and support Falcon 9 at the launch pad and uses its umbilicals or flexible lines to route the vehicle's fluids, power, and telemetry from ground systems to the rocket and payload until Falcon 9 switches to internal power. There you can see those clamp arms beginning to open right under Dragon at the top of the second stage. You should see that truss structure on the right.
On countdown, LD pulling for MD for final status check.
MD is go for launch.
You see the transport director reclining from Falcon 9. And there it is, fully reclined from Falcon 9.
Range is also green and ready to support. If for some reason we are not able to launch tonight, we do have a backup opportunity tomorrow, Tuesday, November 5th at 8:06 a.m. Central Time, 9:06 a.m. Eastern. At this point in the countdown, both the first and second stages are nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. At T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 will be in startup. This means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken over the launch countdown. And just inside T-minus 2 seconds, we'll light the Merlin 1D engines for liftoff.
The vehicle continues to be healthy, and the Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues. Currently, the weather is green, and the range is ready to support at T0 at 9:29 p.m. Eastern Time. Weather is looking good, and in these last few minutes, Falcon 9 is performing final health checks on the primary communications, avionics, and propulsion systems ahead of launch.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
And with that, we're hearing the checkouts of the second stage thrust vector control actuators underway and referred to as the engine gibble or wiggle test. And this is when SpaceX moves the nozzles ever so slightly to make sure that the guidance hardware is acceptable for flight. And as Dragon now moves into auto idle, continues those checkouts for the first stage engines, and that happens just seconds before ignition. At the time of launch, the International Space Station will be flying some 260 statute miles crossing the Atlantic Ocean.
Falcon 9 is in startup. Dragon is in countdown.
SpaceX launch director, go for launch.
There is that final launch director go. All systems are go for launch of Falcon 9 and the Sierra 31 mission.
T-minus 30 seconds. Seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition, engine full power, and liftoff. Go SpaceX, go Falcon, go CRS.
Vehicles pushing downrange, and we have liftoff. NASA's SpaceX 31st commercial resupply mission is on its way to the International Space Station, carrying science, supplies, and the spirit of exploration.
Now, during ascent, we will tilt or gimbal the engines, guiding the rocket into what we call a gravity turn. Now, during this turn, the vehicle is flying both up and horizontally away from the launch pad. The rocket
Power telemetry nominal.
typically needs to go 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
avoid getting pulled back down to Earth. You just heard that call out that Falcon 9 is supersonic. And shortly, we'll be throttling the engines back in preparation for max Q.
Max Q.
There's that call for max Q. That's the maximum aerodynamic pressure that the vehicle will see during ascent. And coming up shortly, we will have a few events in quick succession, starting with main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation,
Stage 2 engine chill.
second engine startup 1, and the boost re-entry forces, which helps us to recover and reuse the first stage. You can follow along on the bottom left and right hand of your screen for these. We are just about 30 seconds from the start of the first stage entry burn. This will be about a 20-second burn that slows that first stage down as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere.
Nominal trajectory.
We are also currently in the middle of the second stage burn. We have about 2 minutes left in this burn.
Stage 1 entry burn.
There is the start of the stage 1 entry burn. And this is a 3-engine burn of the first stage, slowing the first stage down as it comes back home.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
And there is that call out for a good entry burn and the flight termination system being saved. Really cool views of the nighttime on the Cape Canaveral coast. The first stage that's supporting today's mission has performed this entry burn for the 5th time. And Falcon 9 is the world's first orbital class reusable rocket. And this is important because it allows us to reuse the most expensive parts of the rocket, which drives down the access to space. We should see that landing burn starting in just a few moments.
Stage 1 landing burn.
There is the start of the stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing is confirmed.
What a beautiful view of that
Terminal guidance.
first stage landing. And with that landing marks SpaceX's 360-second recovery of an orbital class rocket, including the first stage landings for Falcon 9 and Heavy. And we are coming up on second engine cutoff 1 here on the second stage in just a few moments.
Stage 2 shutdown.
There is that call out for SECO 1. You can see that MVAC engine slowly cooling off.
Nominal orb insertion.
There is that confirmation of a good orbit. Looks like we are on track for Dragon separation in just a few minutes here at the T plus 9 minute and 25
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
second mark. You see that MVAC engine continuing to cool down. And we are waiting for Dragon separation here in just a few moments.
Dragon separation confirmed.
There is confirmation of Dragon separation. You could just see it floating away there. Now, if you're just joining us, we did have a successful launch from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center. and everything has proceeded nominally so far. We had stage separation occurred at about 2.5 minutes into flight, and that was followed by a successful landing of Falcon 9's first stage on landing zone 1, and that marked the 5th landing for this particular booster. And for those of you following along, this Dragon spacecraft previously supported 4 commercial resupply missions for NASA, including CRS-21, 23, 25, and 28. At about a few minutes ago, we had a successful second engine cutoff, or SECO-1, and this was followed by a confirmation of a good orbital insertion. We recently saw Dragon separation floating away from the second stage as it begins its journey to the International Space Station. We should see the start of nose cone deploy here for Dragon shortly as well. A very exciting sight to see. Dragon, you saw, was drifting away from Falcon 9's second stage, confirming spacecraft separation. Let's check in with Joseph as we prepare for nose cone deploy and preview what's in store for the rest of the flight.
Thank you very much, Yome, and we're following along here from Mission Control in Houston, a wonderful launch of Dragon from the historic launch pad 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and it's great to see Dragon in orbit and starting its journey on the way to the International Space Station. We're continuing our coverage here in Mission Control Houston and awaiting for the nose cone to deploy, and that is currently about to begin here in just a few moments. The nose cone is at the very tip of the Dragon spacecraft, and once it's deployed, it will expose the 4 forward bulkhead Dracos. These Draco thrusters will execute a series of maneuvers necessary to raise Dragon's orbit and meet up with the International Space Station, and all that will begin in a little over half an hour from now. Now, for Dragon overall, it is carrying well over 3 tons of cargo that is heading to the International Space Station and the Expedition 71 crew, and that includes crew supplies, of course, science investigations, spacewalk equipment, vehicle hardware, and computer resources. And one thing that the Dragon is carrying also is a lot of food for the crew on board, and a common and fun question we get here at NASA is what kinds of delectables are inside Dragon and are on their way to the station for that crew who are anxiously awaiting them. And we did receive note that there is a fresh food kit that includes some fruits and vegetables, much like citrus and apples, some blueberries, sweet onions, and all that on its way inside Dragon right now. There are also 4 zipper crew kits, including crew preferences of coffee. With the holidays arriving, there's 1 bulk overwrap bag, or bob, that features special occasion holiday items like lobster, crab, and quail. In addition to these items, there are also 110, that's right, 110 bulk overwrap bags containing standard food menu items, as well as some crew preference choices along the way. Now, as we take a look at the control rooms that are monitoring Dragon's progress and the International Space Station, there on your left, the International Space Station Flight Control Room, which is where we are here in Mission Control Houston. And then, of course, on the right, the teams in SpaceX monitoring Dragon's journey. And now this journey is going to continue on into the early morning hours and through the phasing burns that will be required to get Dragon to the space station by both teams, and then they will come together jointly just before docking to work and connect the cargo craft to the orbiting laboratory. And we're continuing to await the nose cone deploy of the Dragon craft as we continue to monitor everything here from Mission Control Houston. Now, we mentioned a series of burns required for the spacecraft once it reaches orbit, which it just did. And now in about 30 minutes or so, we will see that first round of what will be 5 burns that will take Dragon onto its next phase of the mission to align more closely with the station. And there are 5 major burns, or firings, of those Draco thrusters on Dragon that will bring the spacecraft close to station before we begin those final approach maneuvers. As we take a look inside the nose cone of Dragon as we speak, as the nose cap is opening right in front of us, and continuing to watch the nose cone deploy, again exposing those forward bulkhead thrusters that will begin those 5 phasing burns for the spacecraft. And we will get video back as soon as possible, but to quickly take a look at some of those burns as the nose cone approaching the about halfway point of opening. The first burn is the phase burn, and that's the first major one that's going to come in about 33 minutes from now, and that's performed at the apogee, or the highest point of the initial orbit, and will raise Dragon's perigee, or lowest point, to a higher altitude. And then from there, we'll transfer over to the boost burn, which will happen in the early morning hours. The next burn, based on what our orbital data will show us, is that'll raise Dragon's orbit until its orbit reaches an altitude that is just 10 kilometers lower than the space station. And from there, we'll move into burn number 3, the close coelliptic burn. And that's followed soon by to place Dragon on an orbit roughly coelliptic with the International Space Station. And this means that the crew will be about 10 kilometers lower than the space station itself during the entire orbit around the Earth. And then we move into burn number 4, which will be the transfer burn. And this is called the transfer burn, where we will be raising Dragon's apogee, or again, the highest point of its orbit, to just 2.5 kilometers below the station. As we continue to monitor the nose cone deploy of Dragon as we speak, about 3/4 of the way there to transfer us into the burn breakdown of the 5th burn, the final coelliptic burn. And that is where we will round out everything with that final coelliptic burn to once again maintain a constant orbit beneath the station, this time just 2.5 kilometers below. And then from there, Dragon will get ready to line itself up, fine-tuning its way before docking in the early morning hours of tomorrow, and that'll start with the approach initiation and then make its way on to waypoint 0. As we continue coverage in a successful on-time launch of NASA's SpaceX 31st Commercial Resupply Services mission en route to the International Space Station. As nose cone deploy just a moment away from locking into position. And we just received confirmation that the nose cone has indeed been deployed, exposing those Draco thrusters that will help the spacecraft climb its way and begin its journey en route to the International Space Station. Now that the nose cone is deployed, Dragon is ready for its phasing burns to the International Space Station with a successful orbital insertion. And I'm now joined by Bill Spetch, Operations Integration Manager of the International Space Station. Bill, thank you very much for joining us.
Great to be here.
We've discussed the crucial role of collaboration and teamwork and dedication in making missions like this possible and ensuring a continuous flow of science, technology, and resources. How have you witnessed this in your team's preparation for this mission and in recent missions?
Well, you know, operating a world-class orbiting laboratory requires extensive collaboration across all aspects of the ISS program. We have adapted to numerous items that were not as we originally planned, and we have the best team in the world, and really around the world, working solutions to every potential problem that could arise. Most recently, the outstanding international collaboration around the very busy traffic schedule to ISS, and adjusting to that ever-changing launch and landing schedule while we prepared for the future by adding new capabilities to the ISS.
It certainly has been a busy time for the space station. It feels like it's been like that for quite some time now. And with this cargo mission, add that to the traffic dossier for this mission. Well, in addition to the cargo being delivered aboard it, another important aspect of this mission is showcasing the spacecraft's reboost capabilities. We touched upon it earlier in the broadcast of this importance and what it means to the International Space Station. But can you explain the significance of this ability and its importance for the space station?
Yeah, the ISS requires periodic boosts to maintain its orbit around the Earth. And normally these are completed by Progress, the Zvezda service module, or even Cygnus. It is important to us to continue to add capability to the ISS, and performing reboost with Dragon is an awesome addition to that capability. Plus, this allows the team to gather data that helps inform the design and operation eventually of the US-2 orbit vehicle.
In your time and in your career with the International Space Station, you focused on maintaining its health and its integrity. How do missions like this one help achieve those goals while also advancing the station's capabilities, like you just touched upon with some of the traffic coming to and fro, also the scientific research and the technological developments?
You know, ISS depends on a steady flow of supplies to safely maintain and continue on with its mission. This mission delivers examples of all those needs for the vehicle. Dragon will deliver food, spares, and of course the very important science that we conduct on board. Dragon also returns items to the ground. This allows us to refurbish hardware instead of building new copies, investigate designs and improve reliability for future spaceflight endeavors, and allows the scientific sample return to Earth that furthers research.
Well, we look forward to seeing all that this mission has to have in store, especially those reboost capabilities for this Dragon spacecraft. Bill Spetch, Operations Integration Manager of the International Space Station. Sir, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Dragon now begins its journey towards the International Space Station, using phasing burns to gradually close in the distance. This process will take about a day and a half, with approach and docking expected actually early tomorrow morning at 9:15 a.m. Central Time, 10:15 a.m. Eastern. Tune in to NASA Plus for live coverage of the final approach and docking starting at 7:45 a.m. Central Time, 8:45 a.m. Eastern, with docking expected around 9:15 a.m. Central, 10:15 a.m. Eastern. With a couple of hours after docking and settling in, the Expedition 72 crew will perform a series of leak checks, and the crew will begin to then unload the Dragon spacecraft. For the latest updates, be sure to visit nasa.gov. We will see you tomorrow for docking, and until then, let's check in one more time with Yome and our team in Hawthorne. This is Mission Control Houston.
Thanks, Joseph. The Dragon supporting CRS-31 will return to Earth in about 1 month. SpaceX is honored to be a part of NASA's Commercial Resupply Services initiative to deliver critical cargo to the space station. We thank NASA.
Landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. Tranquility Base here. Eagle has landed.
Feet, down at 2. Feels good. 20 feet. Going down at 2. 10 feet. feet. That contact. Stop, push. Engine stop. Engine arm. Proceed. Command override off. Mode control ahead. Hold. Pings auto. Okay, Houston, the Challenger has landed. Houston, you can tell America that Challenger is a Taurus Littrow.
"50 years ago today, Apollo 17 Commander Gene Cernan and Lunar Module pilot Jack Schmitt guided Challenger to a pinpoint landing on a barren rock-strewn area of the moon called Taurus Littrow. A half-century later, NASA's newest moon explorer, the Orion spacecraft, is barreling its way back home after circumnavigating the moon and beyond in an elliptical distant retrograde orbit, now less than 2 hours away from splashing down in the Pacific Ocean west of Baja California to complete its shakedown mission that has opened a new era of deep space exploration. Good morning from the Artemis Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston and Mission Control, where the entry team of flight controllers is on duty, ready to bring Orion home to complete a 25-and-a-half-day mission. As he was for the launch of Orion more than 25 days ago, NASA Flight Director Judd Freeling is leading the entry team here in the White Flight Control Room. The target for Orion is growing larger in the field of view, moment by moment. This is a live view of the Earth from a distance of 15,000 miles away. About 3 hours and 40 minutes ago, Orion conducted the final major maneuver of its mission, a return trajectory correction burn of its thrusters to further fine-tune its path toward its splashdown site in the Pacific. We'll be heading out to the Pacific shortly for the scene where Orion will be recovered. After launching atop the Space Launch System more than 25 days ago and traversing some 1.4 million miles in its circuitous orbit past the moon and back, the most critical phase of the Artemis 1 mission for Orion is at hand. It is homecoming day, so let's run down the milestones you'll be hearing about and seeing over the next couple of hours. Next up for Orion will be the crew module's separation from the European service module. That pyrotechnic separation is scheduled at 11 a.m. Central Time, just 20 minutes before Orion begins its entry into the Earth's atmosphere at an altitude of 3,200 statute miles. Now, we had planned for Orion to conduct a maneuver called the raise maneuver, a 16-second thruster firing to orient itself at the proper angle for its plunge back into the atmosphere. But the latest targeting for Orion from the flight dynamics folks here in Mission Control indicates such a precise trajectory for the spacecraft, it was determined that the raise maneuver was not required. That could still change following crew module, service module separation, but at the moment, the raise maneuver will not be required. The major objective of this mission is to test the spacecraft's heat shield against the searing heat of entry, where temperatures will build up to around 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit around Orion, half as hot as the outer surface of the Sun, twice as hot as the temperatures endured by returning space shuttles and other crew vehicles. Orion will perform what is called a skip entry, dipping into the atmosphere, then lifting out of the atmosphere and dipping back in like a flat rock skimming across a pond. This will provide aerobraking for the vehicle, will help to dissipate some of the vehicle's inertia, and will provide data needed in the future to select multiple splashdown sites for crewed missions. We are expecting 2 periods during entry when the buildup of heat-generated plasma around Orion will block communications and the receipt of data with flight controllers here in Houston. The first blackout should begin around 11:20 a.m. Central Time for just under 5 minutes, right around the time of peak heating on Orion, as it travels about 25 times the speed of sound. The second blackout period is expected around 11:29 a.m. Central Time for just under 3 minutes, right after the skip entry maneuver is complete. About 5 minutes after we regain communications with Orion, the pre-programmed commands stored on board will trigger the deployment of 3 parachutes at the top of Orion to pull the forward bay cover off of the crew module. That will initiate the sequential deployment of 2 drogue chutes and 3 pilot parachutes, followed by the 3 large main chutes to slow down Orion, enabling it to gently splash down in the Pacific. The current splashdown time, 11:39 and 42 seconds a.m. Central Time, 9:39 and 42 seconds a.m. Pacific Time. We'll be talking more about those parachutes shortly. The weather forecast at the splashdown site west of Baja California is excellent. The Spaceflight Meteorology Group here at the Johnson Space Center has just issued a forecast calling for scattered clouds.
The report sees, as you mentioned, 4 to 5 feet. We're looking good there. Let me show you the bridge deck where we are currently positioned. This is looking forward for the ship. I talked to Captain John Ryan, who says that he currently has the ship in a racetrack going around the location near where splashdown is, just upwind of it, so that the debris that comes down, that being the crew module and the parachutes, the forward bay cover, when it separates, will be all downwind of us. Now, preparations are already underway. We can hear the helicopter engines running, so we want to take you to a live view of the flight deck. This is towards the back of the ship, where just 5 minutes ago, the Navy started the engines on 2 of the 3 Navy MH-60s, or Nighthawk helicopters, that will be used for the operation. There you see them on your screen. The 2 helicopters on the left side of the flight deck, they will be involved in the operation. The third to the right is a backup helicopter. Now, one of the helicopters will use the Navy's infrared targeting system, which will start looking for Orion at an altitude of about 50,000 feet. Should be able to quickly lock on to Orion's heat shield, which should be still very hot after reaching 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit on the heat of reentry. The second helicopter will track the forward bay cover, a 1,000-pound, 9.5-foot wide titanium cover on top of Orion, which protects the parachutes during the heat of reentry. It is jettisoned to allow them to come out. Now, NASA's plan going in was to recover it, but they've made an adjustment due to the seas and the limitations of a small boat crane needed to lift it out of the water. Both helicopters, if you can see just to the left of that helicopter at the bottom of your screen, have GSS cameras mounted to them. These are ultra-high-def cameras to record, pre-position themselves in the open sea to recover debris from the descent operation, and then, of course, secure the Orion crew module itself. The Navy dive team will also take above water and underneath water photography of the heat shield before the crew module is moved. This is for all engineering purposes, so they can see it freshly returned from space. Once the divers have Orion stabilized with tow ropes, you see that bright yellow structure right dead in the middle of your screen. That is the cradle that the boats and the winch lines will pull into position and put it right down on top of that cradle. They will flood that deck with water, roughly about 6 feet, and then with a careful choreography of winch line and lines being pulled and maintained by sailors, they'll put it in position for its ride back to San Diego. Now, coming up, we'll speak to one of the Navy divers who will be in the water helping. In fact, he's on deck standing by in just a few minutes. He's ready to go into the water. We'll get some words from him before he goes out on his assignment. Looking good on the ship right now. Rob, we'll send it back to you in Houston.
Thanks, Daryl. And again, a live view from Orion as it continues its pinpoint journey back towards its splashdown site, not far from where you are out in the Pacific. We will be going back to Daryl Nail on the USS Portland frequently during the course of today's coverage. Orion is wrapping up, as we said earlier, a mission that will have spanned 1.4 million miles, having flown further away from Earth than any human-rated spacecraft designed to return humans to Earth. And of course, the big test that's coming up, the ultimate test of its heat shield that will repel temperatures that will build up around the base of Orion to about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit at peak heating as Orion barrels back into the Earth's atmosphere. It has been An incredibly successful mission for the Orion spacecraft. We'll be talking to a variety of people about all that, officials and managers and engineers throughout the course of our coverage today. But for the moment, let's take a visual and interactive look at this mission with NASA's Philip Hargrove, who will use the moon board